Low back pain often begins long before any visible injury appears, not as a failure of structure, but as a breakdown in communication between the brain and the muscles that quietly protect the spine, because the body is not simply a mechanical system of bones and joints, it is a living network of signals. And when those signals fade or become distorted, stability is replaced by uncertainty, especially in the deep muscles that were designed to work automatically beneath conscious effort. Scientific observation shows that muscles like the transverse abdominis and multifidus do not exist to create large movements or impressive strength. They exist to create reassurance, activating milliseconds before motion begins, forming a gentle corset around the spine that tells the nervous system everything is under control. When pain appears, the brain often responds by switching these muscles off, not out of weakness, but out of protection, because pain changes motor patterns and the body chooses stiffness or avoidance over subtle control. Over time, this protective strategy backfires, leaving the spine unsupported during everyday movements like standing, reaching, or turning. The first essential exercise is not dramatic or exhausting, and that is precisely why it works, because it does not demand power, it demands attention. Slow, controlled activation retrains the nervous system to recognize stability without bracing, teaching the body that support can exist without tension. Research into motor control shows that when deep stabilizers are reintroduced gently, pain sensitivity often decreases, not because tissue has changed overnight, but because the brain updates its internal map of safety and threat. Movement becomes smoother, less guarded, and more efficient. What makes this approach effective is its humility. It does not try to overpower pain, it listens to it. Instead of forcing the spine into rigid alignment, it allows the body to discover balance through small, precise adjustments. The nervous system learns that stability is a dynamic process, not a frozen one, and that the spine can remain protected even while the limbs move freely. This shift reduces unnecessary muscle guarding, which is one of the hidden contributors to persistent low back discomfort. Breathing often plays a silent role in this process, because deep stabilizers coordinate naturally with the breath, and when breathing is shallow or rushed, these muscles struggle to engage. Slow, intentional breathing paired with controlled activation creates internal pressure that supports the spine from within, distributing load evenly rather than compressing vulnerable segments. This internal support system is subtle, but its effects are profound, especially for people who have lived with pain long enough to fear movement itself. Over time, this simple exercise rebuilds trust, not just strength, allowing the brain to release its constant vigilance. As trust returns, movement no longer feels risky, and the spine no longer needs to shout through pain to demand attention. Stability becomes something the body feels rather than forces, and in that quiet confidence, the foundation for long-term back health begins to reemerge. The human spine is often blamed for pain that does not truly belong to it, because pain is rarely about a single joint failing. It is more often about a system compensating for what has gone missing elsewhere. From a biomechanical perspective, the lower back is designed for stability with modest movement, while the hips are designed for power and range. Yet modern life reverses this relationship. Hours of sitting gradually quiet the hips, and when the hips forget how to move freely, the spine steps in to fill the gap, bending, twisting, and absorbing forces it was never meant to manage on its own. Scientific studies of movement patterns show that people with chronic low back pain often display reduced hip mobility combined with increased lumbar motion, a pattern that places repeated stress on spinal joints and soft tissues. This does not happen because the spine is weak, but because it is obedient, responding to the body's demand for motion wherever it can find it. Over time, this excess motion creates irritation, and irritation invites protective tension, tightening the very structures that need freedom, creating a loop that reinforces discomfort rather than resolving it. The second essential exercise works by restoring the original agreement between the hips and the spine. It introduces hip movement in a controlled, intentional way, allowing the brain to relearn where motion should come from. By keeping the spine calm while the hips move, the nervous system updates its internal model of efficiency. This is not about stretching aggressively or chasing flexibility, but about re-establishing clarity, teaching the body that movement can be shared rather than stolen. What makes this approach effective is that it respects how the brain prioritizes safety. When movement feels unpredictable, the body tightens, but when motion is slow, guided, and repeatable, the nervous system relaxes. Controlled hip exercises reduce the demand placed on the lumbar spine during everyday tasks like walking, sitting down, or lifting objects, and as load shifts back to the hips, spinal tissues are given space to recover without being isolated or immobilized. There is also a subtle psychological shift that occurs when hip motion returns. People often describe feeling taller, lighter, or more fluid, not because their anatomy has changed, but because their movement strategy has. The body no longer braces for each step, and the lower back no longer acts as a hinge for the entire system. This redistribution of effort is essential because pain thrives when one area is overworked and misunderstood. As the hips reclaim their role, the spine regains its sense of purpose, no longer asked to do too much, nor forced into stillness. Movement becomes organized rather than chaotic, and with each repetition, the nervous system reinforces a pattern that favors balance over strain. In this way, restoring hip mobility is less about increasing range and more about restoring harmony within the body's design, allowing the lower back to settle into a role that supports life rather than resists it. Pain subtly reshapes the way people breathe, often without them noticing, because when discomfort enters the body, the nervous system prioritizes protection over efficiency. Breathing becomes shallow, quick, and confined to the upper chest, a pattern associated with heightened stress and reduced postural control. From a physiological perspective, this shift matters deeply because breathing is not only about oxygen exchange, it is a central component of spinal stability, linking the diaphragm, abdominal muscles, pelvic floor, and deep spinal stabilizers into a single functional unit. The diaphragm sits at the top of the core like a dome, and with every calm inhale it descends, increasing pressure within the abdominal cavity. This pressure acts like an internal support system for the spine, reducing compressive load on the lumbar segments. When breathing is restricted, this system collapses, forcing superficial muscles to compensate and increasing strain on the lower back. Research in movement science shows that altered breathing patterns are common in people with persistent low back pain, not as a cause of weakness, but as an adaptation to discomfort and fear of movement. The third essential exercise integrates slow breathing with gentle spinal control, because the nervous system learns best when safety is reinforced from multiple directions at once. As breathing slows, heart rate decreases, and the brain shifts out of a threat-dominant state. This change allows deeper muscles to engage without force, coordinating naturally with the rhythm of the breath. The spine benefits not from muscular tension, but from evenly distributed pressure that stabilizes from within rather than compressing from the outside. What makes this approach powerful is its accessibility, because breathing is always available, even on days when movement feels intimidating. By pairing breath with subtle control, the body learns that stability does not require holding or bracing. Instead, it emerges as a byproduct of coordination. The diaphragm, once freed from stress-driven patterns, resumes its role as a postural partner, working in harmony with the abdominal wall and pelvic floor to support the spine during both stillness and motion. There is also a profound neurological component at play. Slow, controlled breathing stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which dampens pain sensitivity and reduces excessive muscle guarding. This shift does not erase pain instantly, but it lowers the volume of the alarm, making movement feel less threatening. Over time, the brain updates its expectations, recognizing that the spine can be supported without urgency or fear. As breathing becomes smoother and more efficient, everyday movements begin to change subtly. Standing feels more grounded, Walking becomes more fluid, and transitions between positions require less effort. The lower back is no longer carrying the burden alone, because support is shared across the entire core system. In this quiet reorganization, the body rediscovers an internal rhythm that favors balance over strain, allowing spinal stability to arise naturally from the simple, profound act of breathing. Many people approach low back pain with the belief that flexibility is the solution, assuming that tightness must be released at all costs. Yet the spine does not suffer most from a lack of range. It suffers from a lack of control. From a neurological standpoint, pain alters how the brain senses position and movement, dulling proprioception, the internal awareness that tells us where our body is in space. When this sense becomes unreliable, the nervous system responds by limiting motion or creating stiffness, not as a defect, but as a protective strategy meant to reduce uncertainty. Controlled flexion and extension address this problem at its root by restoring clarity rather than chasing extremes. Instead of forcing the spine into deep stretches or rigid postures, this essential exercise invites slow, intentional movement within a comfortable range. As the spine moves gently forward and backward, sensory receptors in the joints and surrounding tissues send updated information to the brain, improving movement awareness. Research in pain science suggests that when proprioceptive input improves, pain perception often decreases because the brain no longer interprets motion as a threat. What makes this approach effective is its emphasis on quality over quantity. The goal is not to bend farther, but to move better, allowing each vertebral segment to participate without being rushed or overloaded. This kind of movement retrains coordination, teaching the spine to distribute motion evenly rather than hinging excessively in one vulnerable area. Over time, this reduces localized stress and encourages smoother, more efficient movement patterns that feel safe and predictable. There is also an emotional component embedded in this process, because slow spinal movement challenges the fear that often accompanies back pain. When people move carefully and discover that the spine can flex and extend without triggering pain, confidence begins to replace caution. This confidence is not psychological optimism alone. It is grounded in repeated physical evidence that the body can tolerate movement. As trust grows, protective muscle guarding gradually decreases, freeing the spine from unnecessary tension. Importantly, controlled spinal movement respects the spine's role as a communicator between the upper and lower body. When movement is fluid and well-coordinated, forces travel through the body more efficiently, reducing sudden load spikes that irritate sensitive tissues. This restores a sense of rhythm to movement, allowing the spine to participate naturally rather than defensively. With consistent practice, these gentle flexion and extension movements reshape the brain's map of the spine, sharpening awareness and refining control. The spine is no longer treated as fragile or rigid, but as responsive and adaptable. In this environment of calm exploration, movement becomes a source of information rather than fear, and the body relearns how to guide the spine with intelligence instead of restraint. Low back pain often persists not because the spine is weak, but because it has been left to work alone. The human body is designed as an integrated system, where force flows smoothly from the ground, through the legs, across the pelvis, and into the upper body. When this chain breaks down, the lower back becomes a bottleneck, absorbing stress that should have been shared. Pain emerges as a signal that coordination has been lost, not as proof that the spine itself has failed. The final essential exercise restores this sense of connection by linking the spine to the movements of the arms and legs. Instead of isolating the back, it invites the entire body to participate in controlled, purposeful motion. Biomechanical research shows that when load is distributed across multiple joints and muscles, stress on the lumbar spine decreases significantly. This redistribution does not require strength in the traditional sense, but timing, rhythm, and awareness, allowing the spine to function as a stable bridge rather than a fragile hinge. What makes integrated movement so powerful is its relevance to daily life. Walking, reaching, lifting, and turning are never isolated actions, yet many rehabilitation approaches treat the back as if it exists in separation. By practicing coordinated patterns, the nervous system relearns how to transfer force efficiently, reducing sudden jolts or compensatory movements that irritate spinal tissues. Each repetition reinforces a sense of continuity, where motion feels smooth rather than segmented. There's also a neurological benefit to integration. Pain often narrows attention, causing people to guard one area excessively. When the whole body moves together, attention naturally broadens, and the brain shifts away from constant monitoring of the lower back. This reduces hypervigilance, a known contributor to persistent pain, and allows movement to feel more natural and less threatening. Over time, the spine is no longer treated as a problem to be protected, but as a participant in a larger cooperative system. Emotionally, integrated movement can be deeply reassuring. People often report feeling more confident and capable when their body moves as a unit, because coordination restores a sense of control that pain erodes. This confidence is reinforced by the physical experience of strength without strain, movement without fear. As the body learns to share effort, fatigue decreases, and the lower back no longer carries the emotional weight of constant caution. With continued practice, these full-body patterns become automatic, weaving stability into everyday motion without conscious effort. The spine benefits not from isolation, but from belonging, supported by the rhythm of coordinated movement. In this state, pain loses its purpose as a warning signal, because the body has rediscovered how to move as it was designed, connected, efficient, and whole.